Hi, I would like to welcome today Patricia Winn, who is going to share with us some information on engaging with the Latinx Hispanic population. Welcome, Patricia.
Hi, Janelle. Thank you so much for this time. So good morning, everyone. My name is, like Janelle said, is Patricia Winn. I have been an early interventionist clinician and service coordinator for the Up to 3 program for several years. I have been involved in the National Children's Study. I got a master's in social work and a master's in early intervention. And I'm currently practicing as a provider of mental health therapy for the community members. And most of my clients are from the Latinx community. So I'd like to provide some suggestions based only on my observations and my experience working with diverse populations, but in no way this presentation should be taken as an absolute or only way to address concerns with the Latinx community. To begin with, I think it's important to mention that the Latinx community is not just one cultural group. So this may open up our minds to observe that we come from different cultures and countries, and we all are very diverse and look very diverse as well. So you're probably aware of this, but we probably have different norms, rules, and even ways to express ourselves in Spanish are different. So my attempt here is to give you general ideas how to help home visitors, interventionists, people interacting with the Latinx culture, how to become a little more aware and competent with the culture. And that brings me to the terms cultural competency, you probably heard that term, and cultural humility. So cultural competency actually comes from the era of the 60s and 70s with the human rights. And cultural competency is loosely defined as the ability to engage knowledgeably with people across cultures with an assumption and knowledge about their culture. So that creates a bit of a problem because through the words cultural competency, we may assume that we eventually will come to a point where we're competent in cultures, we're experts in other people's cultures. It also could create biases and stereotypes and put people in small groups trying to find things that are equal for them. So that creates a little bit of a problem, but so since we were aware of that, another term has been arising, and that is cultural humility. And that term came about in 1998. And what it focuses on is self-reflection and personal critique, knowledge about our own biases, and recognizing that the shift should be on us, not on the culture we're interacting with. That provides us with self-awareness and hopefully create cultural humility involving and understanding the complexities and identities of the people we interact with. So moving on, as you would know, the Latinx population is ever increasing, not only here in Utah, but in the United States. So it won't be long till we see more of the early childhood programs be represented in diverse groups. This is why it's very important to be self-aware, have humility as we interact with other cultures. So you probably, when I say the word cultural practices or Latinx culture, some things come to your mind. And that may be maybe Cinco de Mayo, festivities, the way we dress, our food, and other visual parts of our culture. But There's another part of culture that we don't see, the way we use eye contact, body language, the way we connect with our families. There's so many other things that we don't see. So when we talk about culture, it goes way deeper than just what we can see. And most of our mistakes are made on those pieces that are not very visual. For example, when we are practicing cultural humility, we would have to understand how is it that we communicate? How do we use language? And how do we use our communication skills with a new group? For instance, how do we react to physical touch? How do we react to eye contact or lack of eye contact? How do we determine what's our comfort zone, physical proximity, and other things? So if you're self-aware of you first, it's easier to interact with another culture. If you have strong negative responses to any of those, be aware that when you go into a Latinx family, you may receive a hug, a handshake, or they may sit very close to you. So be aware how does that all feel in your body. Let's see, what else should I provide information on? So how we communicate is also very important. Our communication styles could be very, very professional, right? Very efficient and very to the point. But going into communities that the communication style is more soft, there's more pauses in between responses, and people may want to get support and feedback from other family members. We may have to be more patient on how we communicate with Latinx community specifically. Sometimes they use the soft voice, and not everyone, of course, but I've heard soft voices, and that's certainly respectful rather than insecure. So be aware that soft voices sometimes are used for respect for you rather than feeling unsure. Another thing to notice in the Latinx culture is sometimes it would be respectful to get along with you and overlook concerns that they may have or questions they may have. It would be a priority to get along and be respectful to you rather than state their own opinion, or if their opinion varies from yours, they may not say it. So it's very important that we open up the floor for them to communicate with us honestly and directly as well, and always checking with them if we're being understood and if they have any questions, and provide safety for them to provide their input. Something I personally noticed, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but when I speak in English, I become a little louder than when I speak Spanish. I don't know why I do that. My Spanish voice is a lot softer, a lot more pause than my English voice. So I think I also noticed that in restaurants and in other places that when we speak English, we could be a little louder. But in homes, we try to use a moderate tone and become less threatening to the family. Although we want to be assertive and clear, sometimes that could come up as threatening. So be familiar of the communication style of the family, kind of be observant in what ways do they use their tone of voice, their distance, and observing, we learn so much. So I've heard once a presenter say, when you go into someone's home for a home visit, can I imagine you going to stay overnight in someone else's home, and they don't know you're a vegetarian, and you don't know what kinds of foods they eat, you don't know if they're formal, informal, if they dress up or don't dress up for dinner. So knowing ahead of time will prevent a lot more stress. It's very important to be aware that getting in contact with the family before the home visits, it's important. Let's see. Another thing that I highly suggest is if when interacting in early intervention or home visiting with families, is to help families understand their role in our services. They're not just a recipient of strategies, but they're partners in the development of their children. Very important that we state that we are professionals, but they are the expert on their baby, and that together we'll work on increasing the rate of development. So to do that effectively, I think it's important to communicate with them before you go into a home visit and explain how the home visit will look like, who will be attending, what are we doing at that visit, what's expected from us and from them, and the family will have also room to process and be able to participate appropriately. One thing that I was suggesting in another group I had is reminders of time. If the appointment is made way in advance, they may need a little reminder that we're coming, that this is the day. Even the week of the visit would be very nice. I also would suggest that having one person as a point of contact where they can call and get a response in Spanish would be very nice. With that statement, I'd like to also say that Latinx community have different levels of use of the English language. Some of them don't even use Spanish. However, it's very nice to make that initial contact on the phone to kind of realize where the preferences are for the family. Another suggestion is when delivering news of delays, it's very important to be sensitive to the social emotional state of the parents. Sometimes delays could be translated as retardations and or more permanent conditions. So very important that we make the appropriate bonds and connections and deliver the news sensitively and clearly. Many times we just say what we found in testing and we're not careful with feelings and eye contact and connections and smiles and warmth to receive the news. It's not just so much on what you say, but it's how you say it. So I'd like to also suggest to prepare families to be part of their child's life, because research shows that interventionists will make all their efforts and come once a month or twice a week, whatever that is, but the child will stay with his parent many more hours. So training the parent and making that connection with the parents very necessary for the success of our goals. Another thing you may encounter going into a Latinx family is they may offer drinks or treats and things. One way to avoid this is taking your own water bottle, or before you visit, announcing them that due to policy, you may not be able to take water, treats, food, anything like that. So they know ahead of time, they don't feel rejected when they offer those things to you. So think ahead of time and communicate with the person that contacts the family about this policy. Let's see, another suggestion I had is to always provide, even if you don't know the language and you're using an interpreter, to provide a friendly body language and friendly tone of voice. You can always make eye contact and smile, even if you're not speaking the language and you are having an interpreter work with you. And that brings me to my next point is when you're working with an interpreter, know that you are also making connections through that interpreter. I would suggest to ask the family if they want an interpreter. Some families will say, we speak English a little bit, and we think, oh, that's enough for us to understand basic stuff. However, what we do is not very basic. We do testing, we do interventions, and that needs a little more proficiency in the language. So asking the family whether they need an interpreter is very important. And for us to find an interpreter that's a professional is very, very important as well, because it's not about translating. Sometimes it's about interpreting what's being said. If your interpreter is using many more words than you, know that is normal, because we're explaining how to do things. Sometimes there's not a specific term in another language, so we have to explain what that term is. So many times you would see your interpreter using many more words than you have said, and wonder if it's being translated adequately. Be cautious on not using, even if the family says we have somebody here that speaks Spanish or English, they may want to use a child. Sometimes they use them in doctor settings and translating with the neighbors. However, be cautious using children as interpreters. They may minimize the results, they may not be accurate, they may not use the terms, know the terms, and also they're put in a very tough position to hear delays of their siblings. It's just not ethical to use family members or children for interpreters. When using the Spanish language, we communicate in a formal and informal way. So make sure your interpreters are using the formal way and respectful way to communicate with families, to create not a sense of hierarchy, that we know we're professionals to be respected and use the usted form, and we're using the do form with families. So make sure your interpreter is aware that needs to be respectful and professional of the family. Remember that through your interpreter, you can also provide honor and respect by using kind words with the families. Talking about terms and words, as professionals, we're used to using abbreviations such as EI, IFSPs, PSL, and so that means nothing to the outside world, even if they were English speakers. So when you're speaking through your interpreter, make sure that you explain carefully what those are. If EI becomes early intervention, and so your interpreter may have to explain that as well. It is not very customary for Latinx families to invite strangers into their home and participate in social services into their home. Most of our countries, we have to take our kids to offices and other places, so it's very a new thing for most newcomers to have that coming into their home. So with some suggestions like that, it's very important to stress that your services are confidential, because this provides families with a sense of security and safety, and that's how you build trust as well. Many of us come from different countries and we don't know what the norm is and what will be shared, what won't be shared. So very important to stress confidentiality and warmth. So those are my suggestions, having worked with early intervention. I'm sure there's a lot more to learn and a lot more to say about this, but I wanted to share with you a few pointers to be able to connect with the Latinx community and best ways to be more sensitive about interacting with different cultures. So that will be my presentation for today. I appreciate your time, and hopefully this will be helpful.
Thank you, Patricia. Such great advice in that. I appreciate you sharing with our group.
Thank you, Janelle. Have a great day.